On today's show, the Cavs announced that Darius Garland needed surgery on his toe injury that hampered him throughout the playoffs. How does that change how we should look at this past postseason and the summer ahead? We'll discuss all that and so much more on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, 92.3 The Fan, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find this show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Make sure you drop us a 5-star rating, leave us a nice review, and be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching the show on YouTube as we get started here, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. A proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode, of course, brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Again, that is code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for half off your first year. We got some news on Monday afternoon. Maybe it was late morning, maybe it was early afternoon. Don't exactly remember the time, but it doesn't matter. That news, of course, that Cavs guard Darius Garland underwent successful surgery on Monday to repair his great toe injury. This is the Cavs statement. The procedure was performed by Dr. Nicholas Strasser at Vanderbilt University Medical Center in consultation with Cavaliers team doctor, Dr. James Rosnek, and Dr. Bob Anderson. His status will be updated as appropriate following a progression of treatment and rehabilitation in approximately 4 to 5 months. Garland is expected to make a full recovery and resume basketball activities by the start of training camp. So this news obviously means that Darius Garland was more injured than I think he was letting on, than the Cavs were letting on, than anybody really knew during that postseason run. And after the Cavs lost to the Pacers, a big part of the conversation was that, well, injuries are not an excuse. They're not. The Cavs should have found a way as a 64-win team with 2 top 10 players in the NBA this season to find a way to win that series, not giving them an excuse for that. And of course, give the Pacers a lot of credit. They're currently 1-1 in the NBA Finals, which nobody saw happening prior to this season starting. But I think that the way this Garland injury has turned out to be clearly much more serious than anybody, I think, certainly externally, and I believe internally too at the time. Like, I don't think that when Darius re-injured this toe in game 2 against the Miami Heat in the first round, I don't think anyone internally looked at this and said, yeah, he's probably going to need surgery 6 weeks from now, because that's kind of what the timeline is. That game was about 6 weeks ago. So I don't think at that time anybody thought that it would have been this type of an injury. It very clearly did change the way Garland played. And I think that this is an injury that we should be able to look at and maybe change the narrative a bit on Darius Garland as a postseason player, because there's a lot of noise that Garland is not somebody that rises to the moment. And I think a lot of that, like, while you can't necessarily prove that wrong in the postseason, I think a lot of it can be explained. And I think that this injury, because you go back and look at what he did in those first 2 games against Miami Heat, and even then, I really struggle to put a ton of stock into that, just because the Miami Heat, like, those did not necessarily feel like playoff games. They didn't feel like they were big games. They kind of just felt like, oh, you know, the Cavs are playing a couple of games that are an extension of the regular season. But in those 2 games, Garland scored 27 points in game 1. He had a very nice game, 10 of 17 shooting, 5 of 9 from 3, looked really good. He had a very good game. Game 2, 6 of 14, just 2 of 8 from 3, so not as great of a game, but got to the line 8 times, made 7 of them, had 9 assists and just 1 turnover. Like, he looked in those 2 games like Darius Garland. And then he comes back and plays in the final 3 games against the Indiana Pacers, and he looks nothing like Darius Garland. He could not shoot the basketball very well. He could not move very well. Like, that was the thing that stood out to me, is that Darius Garland, in the games that he played against the Indiana Pacers, did not look like a guy that should be playing playoff basketball. It looked like that toe injury was bothering him a lot. And I think that the fact this news comes out now on Monday, June 9th, does help to explain a lot of it. And I think that this is something that should change the narrative about Darius as a postseason player. Because for me, I look at this and say, that guy really went out there and played through an injury he probably shouldn't be playing through. Because we are at this point now, and I want to look up the exact date just so I know exactly how far away we are from the Cavs being eliminated. It was, I believe, May 13th was their final game of the playoffs. That was game 5 against the Pacers. It was a Tuesday. So that will be 4 weeks ago tomorrow, the 10th, when the Cavs stopped playing basketball. The fact that this injury was still enough of a burden that 4 weeks later he needed to undergo surgery, I think explains the severity of it. And of course, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to pretend to be a doctor. I'm not going to pretend to know the ins and outs of this injury. But it's hard for me to imagine that if 4 weeks after the season ended, if it's been 4 weeks just about since he's played basketball, because I'm going to assume that Darius Garland has not done very much this offseason if he is having surgery on this at this point. I would think, and I'm again assuming, so maybe I'm wrong here, but I'm going to assume that a lot of his postseason stuff was rest and recovery and trying to get it right, and it didn't get right, and that's why he needed surgery. That would be my best guess. But for that to be the case, for this injury to be as significant as it was, it is hard, and I hate to do this because I don't like giving free passes away, but it's hard for me to look at that series against the Pacers and hold that against Darius. The guy was playing on a pretty significant injury that could cost him part of next season, because the injury update the Cavs put out said 4 to 5 months. Now, they also said he's expected to be ready for the start of training camp, but 3 months from now is September 9th. That is about the time when teams start getting together and start doing stuff to prepare for training camp, right? Like we heard last season or last media day, Kobe Altman, what did he say? He called Ty Jerome the MVP of September. That stuff starts around Labor Day weekend. Labor Day is September 1st this year. That is when you will start to hear reports or see reports, or you'll see stuff on Instagram about, oh, the Cavs all gathered. Donovan Mitchell hosted the Cavs in New York City. In previous years, Darius Garland has hosted the Cavs in Nashville. Maybe Evan Mobley will be hosting the Cavs in Los Angeles in September. And they will have, I don't know the best way, like they will have team organized activities is the best way to kind of term it. Darius is not most likely going to be able to take part in those. So 4 months puts you at September 9th, or no, 3 months puts you at September 9th. 4 months puts you at October 9th. Training camp is going to start before then. So I don't know if the timetable is 4 to 5 months, I do think, and the Cavs said they expect him to be ready for training camp, but those two timelines don't exactly line up. So let's say that he's not ready until 5 months. That puts you at November 9th, which you are well into the regular season at that point. Now, of course, if he misses 5 or 10 games at the start of the regular season, considering what the goals are for the Cavs and just what they aim to be next year, I don't think him missing time at the start of the season is going to be something that matters all that much. I think that we can look at this and say, yes, as long as he is right and healthy for the postseason, that is what matters. And that is the truth, because as they have all said following this season, the only thing they're going to be judged on next year, and I kind of think that's how this year was too, but next year is going to be pushed to a more extreme level. The only thing they're going to be judged on is what they do in the playoffs. Are they going to be a team that succeeds in the playoffs? Are they going to be a team that doesn't succeed in the playoffs? That's the only thing that's going to matter. Whether or not they get off to a 15-0 start next year in October, November isn't going to matter. Nobody's going to care. But Darius's injury could realistically bleed into the regular season. So I think if the injury is this bad, should this impact how we look at what Darius did in the playoffs, what the Cavs did in the playoffs? Because I have spent so much time over the last couple of weeks saying that the injuries mattered in this series, and they did. Darius was playing on one foot. He had an injury that was bad enough that 4 weeks after the season ended, he still needed to get surgery. And it's not as if it's just a surgery that he's going to be ready in a month. It's not a minor thing. I really don't think there is such a thing as minor surgeries. Like anytime that you are knocked out and put under the knife, I tend to think it's a pretty big deal. So I would like to classify this as not being a minor deal. Now, this doesn't make it okay that the Cavs lost in the second round against the Pacers. But I think that knowing that the injury was this severe, this significant, should start to color the way we look at that series. And the last thing I want to do is take away credit from the Pacers. But I think it's a little bit easier to look at this and say, man, was this postseason more about the Cavs' failures, or was it more about they got some really bad luck at the worst time? Because while I don't think it's ever just one thing, and it's not just the injuries, there was a lot that went into it. But the more I look at this and I see Darius Garland's injury, how significant it was, and knowing that watching that series, at all times when they were struggling, it felt like, man, if they had a healthy Darius Garland to relieve a lot of the pressure that the Indiana Pacers were putting on them, you feel differently about the Cavs. Donovan Mitchell was hurt. Evan Mobley was hurt. And Darius Garland had a pretty significant injury. Does that make it more likely the Cavs are going to now be confident in running back their core? How likely is it Darius Garland gets traded now? I think those are all fair questions to ask. How likely was it that he was ever going to get traded? I don't know. We're going to talk about all that with continuing this Darius Garland injury conversation next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by DoorDash. NBA fans, you know what time it is. Playoff season. It means big performances, even bigger rewards, and DoorDash is bringing the heat with a slam dunk deal for Dash Pass members during the 2025 NBA playoffs. It's called They Swoosh, You Score. Anytime a player drops 50 or more points in a playoff game, Dash Pass members score a free 3-piece crispy tender combo from Wingstop the very next day. Just place an order of $20 or more and use code WINGSTOP50 at checkout. That is WINGSTOP50 at checkout. That combo is yours. Crispy, delicious, totally free. You can't beat that. All three of those things, awesome. The offer, of course, is valid noon to midnight the day after the game. Terms do apply. There is no game tonight. If you are watching or listening to this on Monday, there's also no game tonight. If you're watching or listening to this on Tuesday, there's a game Wednesday. So maybe on Thursday, if somebody scores 50 in Wednesday's game 3, you can take advantage of this great deal. Like I said, sign up for Dash Pass to unlock this and more exclusive deals all season long. When any player scores 50 or more in a playoff game, Dash Pass members can grab a free 3-piece crispy tender combo from Wingstop the very next day with a $20 or more order and code WINGSTOP50. That's Dash Pass, your door to more savings, more flavor, and more ways to win. Terms do apply. So with Darius Garland's injury, I think it's fair to kind of color the way we look at the postseason. I think it also gives us some clarity on what this summer is going to look like. I have not ever held the belief that Darius Garland would be traded this offseason. I've felt like, and I think that this has kind of been conveyed in all of the episodes I've done about this topic over the last couple of weeks, but I have felt as if this was a lot of noise. Darius Garland, I do still think is available, but I don't think that the Cavs are rushing to trade him. I don't think that Darius Garland is somebody that the Cavs were going to trade unless they significantly felt like they were winning that trade. They were never going to trade him just to trade him. That never made sense. I don't think that there were a lot of trades out there that made sense. I thought Monday morning before this deal was, before this surgery was announced, I thought there's probably a 70 to 75% chance that Darius Garland is back in a Cavs uniform next season. I felt as if a trade was that unlikely. 25 to 30% chance he gets dealt, just because there are a lot of complicating factors, and Darius Garland is a very good player, and you should never be trading very good players just to trade players. I do think that you look at that and say, well, now, if Darius Garland is likely to miss some time potentially, as ESPN has reported at the start of the season, what teams are going to want to trade for that? Who is going to now want to overpay for Darius Garland this offseason? I think that list probably just shrunk. I was having a conversation with Philip Rossman-Reich of Locked On Magic about this and just how unlikely we felt a Cavs Magic trade would be, because it doesn't make sense certainly does not make sense in my opinion, for the Cavs to send Garland anywhere else, or certainly to an Eastern Conference contender this offseason. But now I don't think there are going to be a lot of teams that have interest in trading for him. I think that this news on Monday significantly does impact Darius Garland's value. I don't think that it means there's no chance he gets traded. But now I mentioned that 70 to 75% number. I think that number is now 85 to 90%, that Darius Garland opens next season probably on the sideline with a 4 to 5 month time frame before he can return from injury. I think that number, the chances of him getting traded, I think have drastically gone down. I never thought Darius Garland was going to get traded, but I feel so much stronger about it right now than I did 48 hours ago. I believe that a lot of this noise has kind of been noise. I think it's just been that. I think that Darius was not ever likely to get traded. I think this makes it more unlikely that he doesn't get traded. And I ultimately think that is the best thing for the Cavs. I do. Now, this injury is obviously not good news for the Cavs, and I'll talk about that in a second, just all of the repercussions that this has. But I do think the best path forward for the Cavs, and I have felt this since the Cavs season ended, I think the best path forward is that Darius Garland returns to Cleveland and has a great year next year and can be healthy for the playoffs and show what he can do in the postseason. Because I think a lot of Darius as a postseason player, I think a lot of that conversation is, well, he didn't have a great series against the New York Knicks a couple of years ago. He didn't have a very good series against the Orlando Magic last year. He was also playing, from what I've been told, roughly 20 pounds lighter than what he'd like to be playing at. I think that matters. He had 2 good games against Miami, as I mentioned in the first segment. Not going to take stock in those one way or another, because those did not feel like playoff games, certainly not against a playoff caliber opponent. And then he has an injury that is significant enough, again, 4 weeks later, to need surgery and potentially cost him time next season. So excuse me for not wanting to judge him based on 3 below average games in the postseason and on a series that happened when he was 22 or 23 years old a few years back against the New York Knicks. I just don't think that that's an appropriate way to look at him. It doesn't mean that he's the perfect player. It doesn't mean that great postseason days are ahead of him, but I personally am willing to give him the opportunity to go prove that right. And I have never felt as if the Cavs were going to be in a position to where they were going to be able to make themselves a better team next season by trading Darius Garland. I never have felt that they were going to be better because of that. And now they're going to be fighting an uphill battle. And I think if they were to want to trade Darius Garland, which again, I do not think they have a strong desire to do so. I think it's been a lot of noise. But now if you want to do that, you're not going to get better. And if you wanted to drastically remake the Cavs, which I don't think drastic changes are needed. I think changes are needed, but I don't think drastic changes are needed. I look at this and say the Cavs probably need to shake things up. But as I've been mentioning on several episodes lately, I think the core is 3 players. I think it's Donovan, I think it's Evan, and I think it's Darius. I don't believe that core needs to be shaken up. I think the role players probably need to be switched around a little bit. That includes Jarrett Allen. I think that trading Jarrett Allen is something that maybe makes more sense after today. I don't know. I think it probably makes the same amount of sense, but I think there's a case out there that you could make that it makes more sense for the Cavs to trade Jarrett Allen now than it did 48 hours ago, because now you can make the case that he is the guy they could probably get the most, or I guess the best return based on what his value is as a basketball player, and the best return in line with his skill level, right? Like you would still, I think, get more back for Darius Garland in a trade, but I think the percentage of I guess the best way to put this is you would not trade Darius Garland for pennies on the dollar right now, but you'd probably get, if you're trading for Darius Garland, I don't think you would trade for him at this moment, knowing this injury and just what could be ahead. I don't think you're trading him unless you get him for like half off, right? Like unless he's on sale. And I don't know that a Jarrett Allen trade is going to get you dollar for dollar back, but you're probably getting him like 90% of his value, I think is fair, while you'd be getting like 50% of Darius Garland's value in the trade market. I don't think that's smart business. I don't think that's what the Cavs are going to do. But I think that if you could trade Jarrett Allen for like 90% of what he's worth, there are ways to make the team better through that. If you trade Darius Garland for 50% of what he's worth, you're not going to make yourselves a better team. And I think ultimately that is where the Cavs are at right now with this. I just don't think that the value for Darius Garland is what it was 48 hours ago. And truthfully, if the Cavs were going to trade Darius Garland, this was going to pop up. When medicals are exchanged and all that stuff that happens with every trade, this would have popped up. And I think that the value they would have gotten for Darius Garland would have gone down anyways, and people would have been really mad about it. So I do think that because of this, and not just, okay, I think that with this injury, it is more likely than it was 48 hours ago, Darius Garland returns to the Cavs next season. Prior to this, I thought it was very likely. Now, I think it's even more likely. I think Darius Garland will be a member of the Cavs next season, and I will have a chance to prove a lot of people wrong when the postseason arrives. Now, what does this injury mean for Darius Garland's offseason, and ultimately, what does it mean for the start of the year for the Cavs? We're going to talk about that next, right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show brought to you by Monarch Money. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track of all that cash, but that's where Monarch Money comes in, because they'll be your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money, it's not just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center where you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending right in one place. You can stop just managing your money and you can start building your wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, even plan for some of those long-term goals that I know you have. And managing money with your partner smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Again, that is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first, or I guess in this case, maybe second or third listen of the day, considering when this one's being recorded and published. But you can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. And if you're watching on YouTube, as we continue rolling along here, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss whenever, there's a random episode like this coming out in 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Monday, because you never know when Locked On Cavs, when Cavs news is going to hit, and I want to be there first for you. So this injury, with it being a 4 to 5 month recovery timeline for Darius Garland, I think it does change a little bit of the outlook of what the start of next season looks like. I think it is fair to expect that Darius Garland is not ready for the regular season. And I sort of think that's how it should be, because if you look at this, Darius is going to now have a summer where he's not going to be able to be training the way that you typically are going to want an NBA player to spend his offseason. I think it's fair to look at Darius Garland and say he's probably not going to be at his best when the season starts. Darius Garland is probably not going to look or feel like Darius Garland again until January, February of next year, because so often the offseason for NBA players is used to work on things, get better. And I think that one of the big things that Darius Garland had going for him that led to such a great first half for him, right? He was awesome in the first half of this season. I think a lot of that was because coming off of what he went through last season with the jaw injury and a couple of other minor things that I do think affected his play, you look at that and he got to recover from that. And then when the offseason was here, yeah, he had some things he had to do differently to try and put weight back on, and probably had to modify some of the ways that he trained. But he could, for the most part, spend last offseason focusing on basketball. And I think that's a really underrated thing. Guys so often get better when they have healthy offseasons. Darius Garland is now not going to have a healthy offseason. He's not going to have an offseason where he can focus on basketball. His offseason is going to be spent focusing on getting better from this great toe injury. And that is the unfortunate truth. So I don't think the expectations for Darius Garland next year should not include an all-star team, should not include being named an all-NBA player. I think the fair expectation for Darius Garland next year, because of this injury, and this says nothing about what I think of Garland as a player. I think if you listen to this show consistently, or even just once in a while, and you've heard me talk about Darius Garland, I am somebody who thinks Darius Garland is an awesome basketball player and is only getting better. But I don't think it's fair to look at him and say he should look like an all-star at the start of next season. He should have a first half of the season that puts him in an all-NBA consideration. I think that he should be looked at next year as somebody who the goal for him during the regular season should mostly be make sure he is healthy and playing his best basketball in March and April and May and June. That is what should matter. And for the conversation about the Cavs to be, it's only going to matter what they do in the playoffs. I don't think there's a player that relates more to, maybe only Donovan Mitchell. But I don't think there's other than Donovan, I don't think there's a player that's more true for than Darius Garland. Whatever Darius Garland does in the regular season, nobody's going to remember. Nobody should care about. What Darius Garland needs to do is have a great postseason. That is what's going to be remembered. That is what's going to matter. That is what people are going to care about. Darius isn't ready for the start of the regular season. It ultimately isn't going to change anybody's outlook, or it shouldn't change anybody's outlook on the Cavs. They're going to be a team that should win a lot of regular season games. I think they can win a lot of regular season games without Darius Garland at his best. They should be a top 2 or 3 at worst seed in the Eastern Conference. And they're going to be a team that is among the favorites to win the Eastern Conference next postseason. Darius Garland's injury means that they're not going to be their best at the start of the year. And I think if you ask the Cavs, if you said, Darius isn't going to be good until March, but he's going to be great after March, they would sign up for that 10 out of 10 times, because that's the stuff that's going to matter. He's going to have to spend, I think, when you think of somebody's offseason, his offseason, you're going to have to look at it next year, or I guess this offseason, as not a lost one, but I would almost view games until January 1st that Darius Garland plays in, which I would expect him to be back before then. I don't think he's going to miss the first 3 months of the season, but let's say he doesn't play until the week before Thanksgiving, which I think that's probably a little bit conservative. I would imagine he comes back before that point, but this is like day of surgery stuff. We genuinely have no idea. I would imagine that he does miss some time, but I think that you're using games from Thanksgiving until New Year's. Darius, that's your offseason. That's your preseason. That is the time where you are spending trying to work on things in your game. That is when you are trying to gradually get better as a basketball player. That is the time that you look at and say, if Darius Garland just gradually improves, by the time March, April, May get here, he should be fresh, because he's not going to play 82 games next year. I can guarantee you that. He should be fresher. He should be ready to go. And I think that this is something you look at and say, yeah, it's a bummer for the start of the season, but as long as Darius Garland is healthy and ready to go for the postseason, it's not that big of a deal. So I don't think he's getting traded. I've never felt as if he's getting traded. Now, I don't know what fair expectations are. We have all summer to talk about fair expectations for him, but I do think that as of this point, we should be operating under the pretense that Darius Garland is going to be a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers next season and probably longer than that. We obviously can't tell the future, but I think today sort of solidifies that a lot of the noise around Darius Garland was just that. It was noise. And we should probably change the way we look at the start of the season for him, because this injury, and truthfully, we should change the way we look at the postseason. That injury was bigger than anybody let on, than anybody outside the organization knew, and maybe bigger than people inside the organization knew. So you look at this and say, hey, maybe the Cavs don't need to change as much. Maybe they can just say, we legitimately got really unlucky. Is that the right thing to do? I don't know. We'll talk about that a little bit more on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Cavs. I will continue the player review series. I was actually going to do Darius Garland today. I was going to record it Monday night, and then this news came Monday afternoon. So that's why this episode is coming out when it is, but I will get back to that. Probably we'll still talk more about Darius Garland and how this foot injury impacts the way we look at things a little bit later on this week. And again, going to be taking your submissions for the Locked On Cavs Rewind series. Going to be going back, looking at old games. Maybe Darius Garland's 50-point game he had against Minnesota Timberwolves a couple years ago. One of them that you want me to take a deeper dive into this offseason, but make sure that you comment those games on YouTube, or you can email them to me at locavsmailbag@gmail.com. But thank you for making this your first listen or second listen or third listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Make sure you drop this a 5-star rating, leave it a nice review, and be a friend. Tell a friend about the show. And if you're watching on YouTube as we get out of here, hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe, hit that notification bell. I'll be back tomorrow talking more about the Cleveland Cavaliers.